Evening, everyone, and welcome to the Community Policing Ad Hoc. It is July 6, 2023, approximately 6:08 p.m. Why don't we just jump into it? We are looking at the OPD suggestions on revisions. Our document from 2022, Lieutenant Toribio. Why don't you get us started?
All right, good evening, everybody. Steve Toribio here with Oakland PD. I'm going to be sharing my screen here, and if I can just get confirmation once I click share, if it is up.
It is up. It looks like we have the, let's see, the document we've been working off of, which was the most recent revision.
Yes. Okay. So we ended off, partway down the document, but I want to go back up to the top because there was an unresolved portion that primarily had to do with the first paragraph that was listed in the police commission's version of the policy. That paragraph is here. I'm highlighting it here. The issue that came up was it talked about the mission of the department, and what we talked about last time was that the department had kind of already had kind of like a mission or core values kind of statement, and that's what it's up top here. It was expressed through the group that what was at the top of the police commission version of the policy was important to be included in some fashion. So we talked about including it somewhere in the document up top where it can be seen and was very present. So I inserted it in as the first paragraph of the philosophy of community policing with some tweaks to make it fit. So there wasn't confusion over the overarching kind of Oakland PD mission. And so this is the paragraph, and then what was removed from it to fit in the context of its insertion is lined out. So instead of saying the mission of the Oakland Police Department, it is to promote. It says the department seeks to promote public safety, et cetera, and then instead of saying to achieve this mission, it just says to achieve this. Then it says the department, instead of department goals, says the department must have, and then it includes the rest of the verbiage. Talks about the collaborative partnerships with the residents and other agencies within the city. So the first paragraph from the commission version of the policy was reinserted in this location, the top of the section of the philosophy on community policing. Any questions, comments, or concerns with how that was incorporated? Another omission that I originally took out, and the debate the concern on my end while reading it was, it sounded like this would it would be constrictive and kind of have authority over like all other policies. I reread it a bunch of times, and I don't know if it was just me kind of how I was reading it at the time, but I went ahead and I just reinserted the deleted sentence. So this is all verbiage here in this section was all verbiage from the prior approved version, sans this sentence, but I just added it back in. So any concerns about the lack of having this verbiage inserted? Hopefully it's resolved because I just put it right back in.
So such adjustments will repair historical harms is now included.
Yeah, hold on. I think there may be. Yep. Yeah, that's included. So it's inserted right here.
Put it back.
Yep, I just put it back.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you mind scrolling up just briefly?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, this is a verbiage difference. This is obviously something that I know we have discussed about where we, some competing thoughts about where we want the department to go where we want their values to be, where we will hope that they will take sort of a North Star and to head towards. This seems to be a compromise to not necessarily say, hey, this is the mission, these are the goals, but to really have that value statement first and foremost without necessarily changing what their mission is and what I guess changing essentially every policy they have on the books. It's a compromise, right? I appreciate that we are doing that. I'm hoping that we can have some real discussion about this before we just move on, as people are mulling over, and I'm kind of talking to fill the space so people can have their thoughts.
Sure.
Mariana.
Yeah, I do see this as a compromise, and I don't think it's sitting well with me. I don't think we're trying to identify or outline the mission or goals of the Oakland Police Department. What we are trying to do is, from a philosophy of community policing and from this ad hoc, we are trying to develop this mission and these goals. And I know that these are some minute changes, and words make a big difference. It just seems to me that this compromise, basically what it's telling me is that the Oakland Police Department is not buying into what we are seeing as community policing, where it's driven by community. Thank you.
Let me sort of press you a little bit on that, Mariano. Is there a word other than mission that might still capture the same thing, but not actually have the word be mission? I mean, I think goals are not part of the that first part, right? The department that doesn't necessarily have goals that are standardized across all policies. So I suppose goals could go back, but is there another word besides mission?
Direction,
Purpose.
yeah.
I wanted to make the comment is that what we're after is cultural change. And if we don't change the culture, we have status quo. And so why are we here?
I appreciate that. That's kind of why these statements like this and value statements like this are important, to instill that culture and to have, when people read this policy and learn about community policing, sort of integrated into their practice. What I might suggest, or what I might propose, and I want to get people's thoughts on it, if we could find a word other than mission, right, but still kind of have the same direction, the impetus for culture change. Does that get us to where we need to go? I don't know what that word is. That we will probably have to figure it out, but does that get us to where we need to go?
Yeah, let me just to make it easier to read. Let me just sorry. I don't, instead of having to look around words.
Can we use like aim, duty?
Let's while Lieutenant Turbia is doing that, let's really think about that. What is what I'm proposing going to sort of get to what we're getting at? I saw Pastor Jackie put her hand up.
Good evening, everyone. I was looking for a chat function so that I can put things in the chat. I don't see that. Is desires a word the department desires to promote?
Yeah, so what I propose, and not to deviate from what everybody's doing now, is looking at this. Is the verbiage the issue, or is the context of where it's placed the issue?
Are you suggesting that it go into the section above?
No, because I think that this is kind of, I can propose it, but again, I think this section here is kind of like a template for things just beyond this policy. And I think that having this philosophy of community policing beneath the kind of the general core values and mission, this speaks to kind of the heart of what we're talking about in terms of community policing. I think it's appropriate where it's at. I think the sentiment of what people are expressing, it resonates in the verbiage here as well. But if we're looking to make it more like dynamic or standoutish or more of something that grabs the attention or just shows or underscores just the significance behind what the department feels behind it. I mean, yeah, let's explore that.
Would it be too strong to say, do we need a replacement for the word mission? Is that what we're looking for?
So
It's an option. I think Lieutenant Toribio is suggesting that the verbiage that is currently on the screen, and I am sort of trying to see if others who have mentioned the impetus for culture change and the sort of the trying to define a North Star for the department would be okay with a word change or some other term. Jose?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I really like the term purpose. I think that is something that really would resonate with most folks in terms of being that North Star that you talk about.
I was going to suggest the same thing, purpose.
That's what I said.
I like that.
Yeah. But I want to add something more to that, Jose. If we were to say to attain this purpose or to attain this mission. So if they have to, if mission as it's written in the standing policy is so sacrosanct, and we don't want to, we don't want to change that, then to attain the mission, to achieve this purpose. In other words, we can't get to what you think your mission is until we do this, understand this community policing like this. And I want to stress that if we're going to change the department, because that's why I'm here. I'm not here to pat the department on the back and say, keep going in the same direction you're going. That doesn't make sense to me. 23 years, we want to change direction. And so we have to put a flag in the ground. This is where we change. This is where we make the right turn. And so if that offends people, then what they're really saying in a nice way, we don't want to change. Everything that's happened before is perfectly wonderful.
Would it be too strong to say the department's purpose, take Seeks out, the department's purpose is to promote and protect public safety? That's the purpose, right? That way they own the purpose, apostrophe S, ownership of purpose, and not to take out seek. Yeah, just the department's purpose is to promote. So it's very deliberate and strong. And then you list the features of what you're trying to, what the purpose is.
What I'm trying to say is that we can't do the standing department core values and mission unless we do this. Unless we do what is written here in this paragraph, written in red.
Okay, so I like Rudy's suggestion. I think that to get to Deacon Lyles, Reggie's thought, we do have that second sentence to say achieve this. We can define what this is, right? It's the.
We use the
core
word
values and
mission again. We use the word to achieve our mission. We use the word mission again.
We can do that. That would also sort of incorporate both the previous sentence and the core values and mission above. I think that gets us there. You had it right.
I'm not sure what the voice is. Should it be our, it's
To achieve the department's,
the departments?
yeah, the department. It's weird with the next few words. To achieve said mission. To achieve said mission.
Got it. Okay.
Brenda?
I think that the reference to mission is too far away from the above paragraph. So I don't know that we should use the word mission there. Because you've got department core values and mission. Then you got the philosophy of community policing where you're talking about purpose. And then you go back to referencing mission.
What if you said to achieve said purpose and
Yeah,
and
I
above
would do-
mission?
I would do purpose.
Okay. Achieve said purpose, yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes a nice referral back to that first line that you can
Mhm.
reinforce it. Okay, yeah, that's good. It strengthens it, yeah, is to promote.
Final thoughts?
You know, I'd like to incorporate here what Reggie keeps bringing up, and rightfully so, cultural change. So where might that be inserted? A suggestion is, mine is that the department's purpose is to promote and protect public safety through cultural change while respecting the dignity and rights of all, blah, blah, blah. So I like the idea of stating it right up front, that in fact, that's the purpose of the department in the process of promoting and protecting public safety. They're acknowledging that in fact, there has to be cultural change. So that's an option that I would propose, that we put the actual words of cultural change in this section in some viable way.
Can we say, would it be more specific to say practices? You know, the cultural practice, change cultural practices, because culture is still kind of vague and wide open, and you can kind of, you know, twist interpretation a little bit. But when you say practices, you're saying like action. You're defining the action that needs to be taken to change the culture.
Could I just,
Please.
part of it is because the paragraph about cultural change and about how community policing is the tool to make that change in the department, I think, is the third paragraph,
Okay.
where it discusses such adjustments will repair the historical harm done by policing in Oakland, mitigate unintended consequences, and avoid further harm by eliminating the inappropriate practices.
Okay.
And so I would just suggest, but of course want to hear more because I see two hands up, that perhaps that may be the portion of this 4-paragraph section that has it. Reggie, your hand up. Okay, Mariana.
Yeah, I agree with that we want to promote cultural change, but just saying it, with all due respect, Jose, I don't think is achieving it. I think more like what Commissioner Howell was saying, like practices. But so one of the things that we can say is that, that OPD recognizes community residents as leaders and the engine in community policing. That in itself is a cultural change because, you know, in the past, you know, there hasn't been that collaboration where there's recognition of residents or community as being, you know, the major part of the partnership. And I think that in itself is a recognition of culture, at least an attempt at making cultural change. Thank you.
Pastor Jackie.
Is that a recommendation to strengthen the language that's in paragraph 2? Because there's already a reference to community-led and all of that. So is that a recommendation to add that verbiage there?
Yeah. Paragraph 1 does mention grounded on collaborative partnerships with Oakland residents, non-law enforcement agencies. Too far. High, a little bit higher. Sorry.
If we scroll up.
Back
just
to
a-
the first paragraph of this section.
Yeah.
Sorry. The latter half of the second sentence of the first paragraph does say.
I
Oakland
mean, the second
residents-
paragraph.
Got it. Where you?
Community policing is the affirmed public policy strategy to achieve the department's mission. It is a policing model in which the officers empower communities through building collaborative, transparent, honest, trusting relationships with the communities they serve. It is a customer service approach to policing which embraces community-led, community-directed problems. That's the paragraph I'm referencing.
I might have lost the thread. Are we suggesting that covers it, or that we want to make some changes to it?
That's the question I'm asking. The previous suggestion, is it incorporated there in that language satisfactorily, or are we saying to strengthen it using the suggested language by Mariana?
Fair question, Mariana.
Maybe there either after that sentence or before, maybe the use of culture change can be inserted there so that there's a connection to it. And then that would satisfy that. Thank you.
I sense the split on the identification of cultural change. Is there anyone else who wants to weigh in?
I think the Senate, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was gonna, you guys probably heard of Peter Drucker and the famous management consultant. But just recently, Keith Ellison, who is Attorney General in Minnesota, he quoted him in his book, Breaking the Wheel, Ending the Cycle of Police Violence. And he made this comment about culture and what we're wrestling with right here. He said, Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant, said, culture eats strategy and policy for breakfast. Something buried inside the culture of MPD determined the behavior of Chauvin, and he goes on, blah, 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 blah. In other words, if we have to be very purposeful to understand that if we talk about strategies and policies and we stay away from or dance around cultural change, we're not doing anything. We're not, all we're doing is having more status quo. And so all across the country, people are recognizing that. And so it's a tough road to go, but you know, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So we have to say what we want and go with what we want. You know, this thing about mission and mission statement, like it's not the Bible. It's not sacrosanct. It's not. And so we want cultural change in Oakland Police Department. We want cultural change. And it's not because we dislike them, it's because we like them.
Pastor Jackie.
I defer. I'll wait. Thank you. But this is the document that we submitted, right? We're re-editing our original submission. Is that correct?
That's where we're getting at.
Okay, thank you.
Jose?
Yeah, I was just going to ask Mariano, where was the insertion of the language you were talking about?
In that paragraph that Commissioner Shea read in terms of community driven, the one that Pastor Jackie referred to, I don't see it there.
It's the
Pastor
second.
Jack.
Oh, I see. So maybe somewhere there, true cultural change through true culture change can be achieved, or we can begin to achieve culture change, something to that effect by, and then that second paragraph.
This is what I'm gonna do. Because it's editing on the fly never really works that well with something like that, especially with a document that kind of has pieces that have been sort of honed down to read into a good section. Mariano, could I trouble you to, between now and our next meeting, to really work on a sentence or where that might go for us, and what that might look like as a proposal, so that we can get through as much as we can tonight, and sort of have eyes on something to work with rather than all trying to think about it.
Sure, give me just a quick minute. Let me take a shot of this, and I might be able to achieve that even before our meeting is over. Okay,
Okay.
yes, I will do that, Commissioner. Thank you.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
Lieutenant Toribio, why don't you put a comment in the second paragraph about the comment that we are going to look at a suggestion about inserting a line about cultural change. Rudy?
So what I was thinking is, have we identified those elements or practices of the past culture that we want to see changed? Identify, instead of just saying culture, which is kind of general and broad, really get into the nitty gritty and identify what cultural practices historically we're looking to switch or change into community policing practices.
Mariano, you're getting more homework.
Well, no, I just want to comment to Commissioner Howell that that's a whole book.
Yeah, that's why you're getting more homework.
The Writers at Night. It's a whole book.
Yeah, I mean, changing community policing, as opposed to, cowboy style and coming into a neighborhood and, but we can go all night, but I will do my best. Thank you.
Okay.
So a note that we're going to come back to that about a line about cultural change, perhaps a proposal for next meeting. Sorry to put a pin on it, but we do have a good amount of document to get through, and also the actual practices to get to. Lieutenant Toribio?
Okay. Continuing to where we left off. Okay, is right around here. Okay, so this is gonna be a point for discussion. Okay. This was a point, and for reference, this is under specific responsibilities for the community resource officer. It says maintain at least one project centered on a neighborhood council priority per assigned beat. CROs are allowed to overlap beat projects as needed. And that was confusing as to what exactly that meant. Was it a CP beat? Was it a parent beat? So did that mean that if I have beat 13, I just need one for beat 13, or do I need one for 13 X-ray, 13 yellow, 13 zebra? So hopefully Owen isn't giving Sergeant Mangai too hard of a time. Chime in if I'm screwing this up, or if I need a little help articulating this. My understanding is that CROs presently are required to have one open project. Okay, that's one project that they have in Serenet that they're responsible for having. And so,
Lieutenant,
yeah,
if I could just kind of update on that. So we do have the training bulletin lists the requirements for beat projects for the CROs as a 1 to 3 open projects a year. And then it also later delineates it gives kind of like restrictions onto how much you can overburden an officer on how many beats they can have, or NCPCs they can be responsible for. So it states since most beats might have 1 or 2 CPs, and then we have several that have, or a couple have 3. It would limit it to each CRO a max of 2 NCPCs responsibility, other than beat 13, which has 3.
now in terms of projects, do I have that right? Or what was it? Because
And so in terms of projects, like we have like our own SOP, but the training bullets of at least 1 open beat per CRO at a time. But the training bulletin that we have listed sets that standard as 1 to 3 projects per year.
Got it. Okay. 1 to 3 projects per year. 1 open project. Okay. So the verbiage as we understood this was that a CRO was required to have 1 project per beat that was an neighborhood council priority. Okay, so if let's say, Manguy, how many beats on average does a CRO have?
So in our current situation, from 2 to 3.
2 to 3. Okay.
Ideally, the way it was written, it was 1 beat per CRO.
Right.
And then a beat could be assigned more than 1 CRO as needed. So like beat 13 or beat
Right.
31, or
Right.
might benefit from that.
Okay, so CROs presently are assigned 2 to 3 beats. Okay, so under the current model, they need to have 1 open project and complete 1 to 3 projects per year, and that is having to cover 2 to 3 beats. So having this clause as it was written, where they have to have 1 project per beat that is a NC priority, was it's not practical, and here's why. 1, the number of projects, or rather all the projects, would essentially simply be neighborhood council priority. Also, the crime reduction teams no longer work in the same section with the community resource officers. So when you had District 1, for example, community resource officer squad, they'd work with the crime reduction team for Area 1, and then they can go and conduct enforcement. Now, there's no CRTs available for CROs. They are all assigned to either ceasefire or the Violent Crimes Operations Center. So the enforcement is done exclusively by CROs. So all that to say, due to staffing, due to lack of resources, I propose this, along with the current practice of having 1 project open. Maintain at least 1 open project, which should, based on police services needed, center on a neighborhood council priority. So the reason for this clause is to prevent a CRO from having to have a project that is a neighborhood council priority if it doesn't focus on police action. I don't know if that makes sense. So let's say that on my beat, I'm on beat 1. I'm just making this up, and my neighborhood council priorities are things that don't require a significant amount of police enforcement. Like, let's say my top priority is there's an apartment building where there are nuisance neighbors. And there are priorities that are like along those lines. The verbiage as it was in the prior approved policy would require that the CRO have a project that is centered on a neighborhood council priority. So the new verbiage now just says that the consideration for the open project should be towards a neighborhood council priority, but it doesn't make it definitive. And so everybody, again, understands projects and priorities are different, right? A neighborhood council could have a list of priorities, and then the CRO, him or herself, have the SARA projects that they do. And it doesn't mean that because they have an open project on one thing, that they're not also working on the priorities of the neighborhood council. They just aren't going to be required to have a project open for it if significant police services aren't needed. So it gives a little like judgment for the CRO in working with the neighborhood council to help determine what's going to be the project. Okay, I've talked enough. Let's hear from other people.
I have lots of questions, but I imagine other people are better or more familiar with neighborhood council priorities. So why don't we take Jose?
Yeah, thank you. You know, the interaction between the neighborhood council and the CRO, in my way of thinking, is the essence of community policing. That's to say that it's a critical element of this whole policy. So while I understand that that the difference between a set of priorities set up by a neighborhood council and an actual priority or project done by the CRO, that in fact there may be priorities that will not need significant police resources. I was just looking for it. There's a provision in here for having the lesser, let's call them priorities of the neighborhood council, be handled by the neighborhood services coordinator, you know, in conjunction with the CRO. But the major projects, the major priorities can and should be done by the CRO. And the fact that they don't have I don't see it being a significant factor that the CRTs are not going to be available for enforcement. I think what's important is that, in fact, the priorities, I'm talking about major as opposed to minor, the major priorities get delineated, they're written up according to SMART principles. That whole process of determining what a priority is, of a major priority of the neighborhood council, can and should be done as a collaborative process between the neighborhood council and the CRO, including the writing up of the priority, which will then become a project according to SMART principles, should be done collaboratively again. But I don't see that just because the CRTs are not available for specific enforcement on the response portion of the SARA process, I don't see that as it being a good reason to not have at least one project open per beat. And I also don't like the 1 to 3 projects per year, because then that restricts the numbers of projects that can be worked on by the CROs. They could conceivably, with that language, just work on one project for the entire year per beat. I don't think that's enough. And again, I think this is a critical element. And just as an aside, what we should be doing, and I say we collectively, the community, should be doing is putting maximum pressure onto OPD, specifically the chief, to increase the numbers of CROs, whatever that takes. Because again, this is a critical element, I think, not just community policing, but the reduction in crime, talking about the collaboration between the neighborhood council and the CRO, and quality of life, which are more minor issues. But the major issues can and should be addressed by the taking of these projects, these priorities by the neighborhood council through the SARA process. And again, that speaks to having those SARA projects be done in such a way that there's a report back at the completion of each step in real time. There's no delineation as to how long that process might be. So I understand that there's not a, as was the original intent, a CRO per beat. But given that there's not a delineation of the time of when that report or that step will be completed and the report being done, that's the flexibility the CROs have in addressing the projects and the priorities. If they take some, a couple months, it takes them a couple months. The point is that they're working on it, and and it's a standing project by of the CRO coming from a neighborhood council priority. So I'll leave it at that.
Rudy?
Yeah, so at the regular commission meetings, I was asking Chief Allison, current chief, when did he think or foresee the staffing of CROs positions? And he says if everything kept going as it was with the academies, that he's expecting around September, October to be able to appoint some CROs, if I remember correctly. So yeah.
A lot to unpack. Okay, I think that I don't think that this. I think this bullet point is more about. It's more about, I think, resources than anything. The collaboration and the creation of the priorities. That's all going to be between or among the neighborhood council, and then the with input, I guess, from the CRO. Ultimately, it's the council's priorities. I think that the idea behind, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, man guy, but I mean, we can list anything in terms of how many projects they can have, but I think the idea behind having a project is that, like, this is something that's going to be worked on consistently and hard to be done. And, it's easy to say, okay, hey, we're required to have these projects open that cover these neighborhood council priorities. But with multiple open projects and CROs having to triage those, I don't know. It's what can happen is you have these projects now that are open forever, and it kind of defeats the purpose of having a project if the attention is not going to be given to it in order for it to be resolved. So I think that was kind of the sentiment behind having this, that CRO needs to have an open project, and it should based on discretion and discussion and just the individual CRO and NC on whether or not that's going to be a NC priority. But what the states is that the priorities should be like a significant factor in determining the CRO's project.
Let me ask a few questions just so that I can get a sense of scale and impact. How often is it that neighborhood council priorities would not rise to the level of, in your mind, is serious enough for police services or police intervention? How often does that happen? Where there are just no priorities that are on that.
I'm not sure. Manga, if you know either anecdotally or if you have actual stats, just the example that we talked about over the phone was like the problem apartment complex or cars that are parking on the sidewalk and being a big issue, and actually having a neighborhood council representative be the one to go out to try to resolve that without a police involvement. But that's still being NC priority. Manga, do you have any other examples, or can you add anything to this?
I would also add that we often get reached out to for unhoused individuals that are causing distress to some of the community members. So we explain to them that there is an encampment management team and there is city policy, and we provide them that policy, but they still want some kind of police enforcement when police enforcement is not an option that's available. So that's one of those times we have to educate as to what can actually be done and what the expectation is. And unfortunately, that comes up on a regular basis.
I appreciate those answers, but my question was, how often is it that there are zero priorities that rise to the level of police intervention?
Zero priorities. That could.
How often? Ballpark? Is it rare? Is it often? What is it?
I would say it is somewhat normal for that to happen. It'd be more people bringing up their concerns as to what's going on with the community, but not specifically asking for a request as to police intervention on that. So they'll ask for statistics as to the crime within the area, such as like the car burglaries, the business burglaries, but they're not requesting for like that. They're not saying that that's a priority. It'd be more like, hey, we've had a couple instances where we had gunshots within our neighborhood, or we've seen somebody walking with a gun, and we'd like for that to be addressed. So those are the most highest priorities that people bring up, that they ask for intervention for, versus just like, hey, we've had a couple of car thefts here, but they're not asking for any kind of actual police intervention at that point.
So then, to the extent that there is such a rule about maintaining an open project, let me just say at all times, because that's what it says right now, centering on a neighborhood council priority, what do you do when what the NC has identified as their priorities don't rise to the level of police intervention? What happens in that beat, in that NC?
We try to address it the best we can. If it's a matter of referring them to resources or bringing in NSC to assist, we will do what we can to address it, but it could be just like an immediate fix versus a long-term goal that would be a SARA project that could address. So it's like, hey, there's this individual sitting in front of my house. Well, that's not a SARA project. That's just that person needs resources, and the EMT team needs to be notified. Click 311. We just have to address it right there and then, versus illegal gambling casinos within some of the communities here, where it involves long-term police work, such as like plainclothes operations, running search warrants, serving the search warrants, and then following up with the city to have some kind of code enforcement, or have them start contacting the landowner to see if something it could be addressed through that route.
So it sounds like then that you're potentially what's happening is that there are just many times when the beat that you're in, the priorities, they just don't rise to the level of a SARA project, and so those are not resources you're necessarily doing on the SARA projects. I get that.
Yes.
and that requiring an open project, at least one of them be on a neighborhood council priority, may not be possible or may not be at that level of police intervention that we're thinking we want police to have in all of the assigned NCs or beats. That's the concern we're getting at here. Right, because like, I mean, if maybe I'm gonna stereotype a little bit,
Be
but
able
if
to
there,
route them.
yeah, if one CRO is assigned to a particularly straightforward, maybe low crime area, 3 beats, and of those 3 beats, none of them rise to the level of police intervention. All of them are calls about someone on a stoop or something. That CRO would kind of be struggling to find a project to do on a neighborhood council priority. This is the concern we're getting at, right?
Yes, but we can always work with an NCPC group to find something we can help them with. So like traffic, there's locations or the CIDE network of traffic accidents. We can help assist with that by doing enforcement and working with the motors to try to have like a longer police presence there, so people understand that, hey, they shouldn't be blowing that stop sign or speeding in this area or ignoring ignoring traffic signals. So we can work and find something, because there's kind of like throughout the city, there's just constant issues. There's auto burglaries, residential burglaries. It's not, there are things that people want to be addressed that they can bring us to level of priorities at almost any point within the city.
If we didn't change this language, wouldn't that press the CRO to really have the NC identify a priority that does rise to the level of law enforcement intervention?
The issue with that too is that now the NSCs and the NCPCs are not fully staffed either. So there's I think only 2 NSCs for BFO 1 over all the beats here, and then not all of them are staffed. So we might not be able to get that kind of communication needed to find priorities for the community at that point, or right now, as things are.
Okay. Would it make a difference if, say, the language said instead, maintaining at least 1 open project, there was a time limitation, like 1 open project a year, centered on an NC priority?
So would it be 1 open project per NCPC or 1 open project per B?
The way I read F right now is 1 open project. It doesn't delineate beats like the previous section does.
I mean, that's kind of in line of how things are right now. And it is not a limitation as to how many projects that an officer can have. Officers can have way more than 1 or 3 open projects a year. It's just setting up like a reasonable standard so the officers aren't constantly just trying to take care of B projects that would not really meet the standard for the high priorities for a community, just to kind of meet a stat. It's just a matter of like, hey, we want to spend the time, we want to spend the effort and the resources. It's just we do have limited resources on doing these things. And especially how we've been limited now from 2 squads working in tandem to now just 1 squad. And then even that 1 squad has now been decimated to like half capacity for each area.
Oh, I appreciate it. I have one last question, and I'll cede the floor, which is I want you to think back to a time when perhaps the CRO unit was staffed in a way that I'll call it was robustly staffed, as close to that as that might be. Think back to a time when that might have been the case. Would maintaining at least 1 project what would be the average number of projects that people would hit per year again, robustly staffed or at its best staffing in the past?
I don't, so I've been with the CROs for about 3 years now, and we haven't been robustly staffed since that time. But
So-
on average, about 5 STAR projects per year per CRO.
I was part of CRO when it was called PSO, and this was in maybe 2012, 13, something like that. It depended. So I know that even amongst the squads, so one CRO or PSO, whatever we were called back then, his projects were open and closed very quickly because the beat to which he was assigned didn't quite have a lot of like major crimes. So he was able to open and close projects pretty quickly, and they were all what came from the neighborhood crime prevention council meetings. I know I had a project that stayed open the entire time I was there for burglary abatement, just because we couldn't hit the numbers that I was hoping to hit. So it varies. I know that's not a good answer, but and I mean, I think that's just the nature of the position, because every beat, every CP beat is going to have its own kind of unique set of circumstances, which is why I think it's kind of difficult to have language that's appropriate for, those beats that are kind of pretty heavy and others that have more, nuanced or specific issues that don't require maybe as much time as other long-term ones.
All right, I appreciate you all putting up with me for that. I really needed to learn a little bit more. Jose?
Yeah, thank you. The reality is that there is no real process for determining priorities that I have seen. We have in Maxwell Park, we have a specific process that we go through to determine priorities. I would doubt that a similar process or procedure exists anywhere else. And it's not to pat us on the back, it's just saying that I think that there's certainly no uniform process for determining priorities. And I've seen and been a part of neighborhood council meetings where they basically took up the meeting entirely just to determine a priority. And in fact, they would do 3 priorities. The point is, it's what processes do exist are few and far between, and they have really no relationship to anything else, to anybody else. That's one. The other is that the neighborhood councils that are impacted the most by violent crime are the ones that are, for the most part, the ones that are least organized. And I mention that because it's the organization and it's the organization starting from the grassroots that's so critical in terms of coming to a process of what is a priority. So there's 3 things that I think we have to keep in mind. One is that there is no uniform process, and there should be, or at least general guidelines for a neighbor council to arrive at a priority. That's one. 2, the city has to make a major effort, and this is what I'm hoping once this policy is accepted and becomes written in stone. The city and OPD need to devote whatever resources are necessary to actually go out and organize at the grassroots level, at the block level, neighborhood councils and block organizations. I'm going to have an opportunity to talk to our new city administrator. And this is exactly what I'm going to tell him. You're the guy that has ultimate responsibility to see to it that this policy gets implemented starting at the block level. So the city has a serious responsibility to do that grassroots organizing whatever kind of resources they need to identify to do that. And I'm not just talking about NSCs. Whatever resources they need to identify, they need to marshal those and do that kind of block by block organizing. The third is that we need to put, again, I'm repeating this point, but I think I'm going to repeat it for emphasis. We, the community, needs to put maximum pressure on the chief to put more CROs out in the beats. So that with the upcoming academies and with community pressure, should be the reality going forward, there should be more CROs to spread this workload out. So it's a long way of saying that I do think that there needs to be the language needs to stay as it is in terms of a project per beat per CRO. I think that is a viable part of this, an important part of this policy. And I think that the CROs, again, the collaboration that's part and parcel of this whole process is absolutely critical to seeing to it that this policy is workable. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
So, Jose, that language is still in there. That's section E.
Okay.
I think the language that Lieutenant Toribio and Sergeant Mangai have been talking about is the F section, which add the clause to what we had previously. We previously had maintained at least one project centered on a neighborhood council priority.
Yes.
Which would generally, I think they understand to mean at all times have one open project centered on a neighborhood council priority.
Correct.
And what they are, and so could you address that part? The part that they're talking about here? Because what I think they're suggesting is that their clause might say, like, have a level of whether, like, a neighborhood council priority. What do they do in a situation where those neighborhood council priorities are not those that you want a badge and a gun for?
Well, I think it goes back to the three things I just mentioned. Every beat has issues that rise to the level of needing a badge and a gun. And so I think by putting that provision in there per beat, it forces the neighborhood council, well, it forces the city to allocate the significant resources or the resources necessary to do the grassroots organizing to strengthen the neighborhood councils so they rise to the level of actually determining what are the most important issues in their beat. And every beat has, for example, traffic issues. So, but there's not, in some of the more violence impacted beats, there's not the organization, not enough people organized, not enough people even know about community policing or neighborhood councils or CROs. They don't even know about community policing in general. And so it hasn't risen to the point that the participation of the community hasn't risen to the point where you've got enough mass, if I could use that word, that in fact you begin to have the dialogue necessary and the process necessary to determine I'm going to use major and minor, a major issue in that beat that does rise to the level of needing a badge and a gun. And I think across the board, you'll find that every beat has issues that run to that level. So it's just some beats don't have enough people, enough participation to actually determine what that specific major issue is. So I think it forces the city to allocate the resources to get the participation necessary in all neighborhood council beats, particularly the ones most impacted by violence. It forces the city to really, I should say, the OPD, well, the city, the mayor, city council, I'm sorry, city administrator, and the police chief to really seriously look at increasing the number of CROs, whatever that takes. And then so there's three things: to force the neighborhood councils to really incorporate a process to determine the major issues. It forces the city to do the block by block organizing to increase their participation so they can do that. And thirdly, the city as a whole needs to increase the number of CROs, because that will mean that you'll have more than enough people to do the one open project per beat. Thank you.
I think we fleshed out kind of both sides of this. Does anybody else on the ad hoc have thoughts?
It's difficult because ultimately I think what this comes down to, when we're putting in policy this requirement on like a work or assignment requirement for the CRO, what has to be considered are the resources. So I think if we're going to have something where, for example, like our one of our current CRO sergeants is saying it's not really attainable to assign one per beat when multiple or when CROs are having to be responsible for multiple beats, without having some clause that covers, what happens if there's overextension, or if resources aren't available to handle the projects. What's going to end up happening is you're going to end up having CROs who are going to be opening projects because it's going to be required by policy, but they're just not going to get done. Or if we're saying that, you got to close, X amount, but guys are responsible, for multiple things, they're going to end up opening projects that can be quickly closed, and that's just to keep their head above water, not be in violation of the policy. So I'm not quite sure what the best way to do this is, other than maybe list the ideal. What do we ideally want? If we want, a project per, beat that is centric on a neighborhood council priority, then let's put it in. But there should be some stipulation to account for the fact that sometimes CROs just aren't going to be able to do it just by virtue of, staffing and resources and other priorities that may not fall to a neighborhood council priority.
Mariana?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how to ask this question, but I'm sensing that this might be a union OPOA concern and not so much resources or capacity. Is it, or am I going the wrong?
No, I think that in terms of having like the department staff, I think that there's a lot that goes into it beyond just, the union. It has to, with the city as a whole. It's kind of beyond my capacity of understanding what goes into, where resources are allocated. I don't think that having anything in a policy, or in this policy, is going to force any hand into diverting the requisite resources that are going to be needed. Looking at the budget, how it is now, and positions that have been frozen. I don't know. It's kind of beyond me on where CRO is heading.
I think what I'm going to suggest is that, Lieutenant Toribio, why don't we take up your suggestion of working on this language? I think the phrase "based on police services" is doing a lot of work there, that we may need to flesh out a little bit. And I'd ask that you put a comment on here that I think E is okay. I think it's F and G that we're really working on here. This is a section to spend a good amount of time on.
Sorry, I think that when I entered in this was in substitution of this, I think. Wait, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Because this was, I thought that these were kind of conjoined if I'm not mistaken. Well, let me look at my comment real quick.
Everybody, I'm gonna have to excuse myself.
Yeah.
I hate to leave in the middle of this, but I have another meeting. I'm already late too. So thank you all for your contributions. Really appreciate it. That's sincerely given. So thanks for everybody, being here. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm gonna have to go. Take care.
Thank you. Sorry, we couldn't get through more.
Stay safe.
Sorry, Lieutenant Toribio, you're right. E was the original without the second.
Yeah. And so this was like what I was trying to rework. So this was the point in question. And I was trying to change it because we weren't getting on the same page as to what that assignment would mean per beat. What did it mean by beat overlap and whatnot? So that's what led to this discussion. Clearly, though, I think we need to spend more time on this, and I think that there's a lot of influence that we may or may not be able to control that's going into what we're using here. And what I mean by that is, I think that the question of resources and staffing has to be considered in the language that we use here. I don't know. I think that's the best way that I can put it. We have to have we can list the ideal and what we want and what's desired, but we need to have something that covers an inability to meet that ideal based on factors that the CRO really can't control.
I'm not going to start that debate because I know that'll suck up the rest of our time. But I know there is that. Like I mentioned, thank you for that clarification. Let's take a good look at this and maybe bring back to the group a proposal, as you mentioned there. Put a few stars there. This is going to be a big one.
Got it. Okay. So we still have some time. I'd like to get through more here. Okay. This point here is kind of where we ended. So the original verbiage was report on progress of neighborhood council priorities by presenting reports on the progress of each neighborhood. In a sense, what the original point said, let me just pull it up. Sorry. I had a kind of like a hodgepodge. What I changed it to, though, why don't we start there, was change the verbiage to allow how the information is presented to be determined by the CRO and the neighborhood council. So the rework language says that the CRO is to report on the progress of neighborhood council priorities by presenting reports on the progress of each neighborhood council priority at neighborhood council meetings in a manner determined by the CRO in partnership with the neighborhood council. Such reports may be presented by, and then these were the types of reports that are in the commission verbiage: an oral report, and then submitting a written report, and then how that should be done. Sorry. So instead of saying, if I'm not mistaken, the original verbiage says, hey, CROs report by doing an oral report and submitting this via written report. It's essentially going to be up to the neighborhood council and the CRO to determine how those updates are going to be given.
Close. The original said you have to report that when you're at the neighborhood council meetings, you make an oral report, and upon the completion of each step in the SARA process, you submit a written report to the chair or vice chair of the NC. It required both. And so this swaps it to decide amongst yourselves, essentially. but providing the options here. It doesn't have that part about reporting at the completion of each step. I imagine that
Yeah, let me see. Let me look at my comments real quick and why I took that out.
probably because it was a lot, but
No,
there are some very strong feelings about it on this ad hoc. I know that much. Sorry, Brenda, I did see your hand.
Sorry, someone have their hand up?
Don't worry about it. Jesse raised my point.
I think it was, I wish I could remember. Lieutenant Febble had mentioned something, and I think it was, I don't remember.
It's a lot. He essentially said it's a lot. It's a
maybe
lot to report at each stage, because sometimes you go through multiple across, just you get through the first two, maybe
yes.
2 days.
Yes.
You might have to go back, to the first day, and then does that mean you're doing 6 reports?
Yes.
It's a lot.
And I think he was also saying that at the council meetings, they may not need to hear a report if a specific step has been completed. Like, they don't want to spend the allocated time, just on going over things. And so what this, I think, does is it just gives freedom to the council and the CRO to determine how and when things are going to be reported.
It's a big change. It does allow some flexibility. The change is not as much not as much as the different types of the forms, but the reporting at the completion of each stage, because that reporting was not at the NC meetings. That reporting was as it happens in real time, as it's occurring.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
And so I would taking up the baton of Jose right now. I recall discussing this in the original meetings. I would start off by suggesting that we should at the very least list the option of submitting real-time reports if those are requested as a alternative. And then I think we get back to the point at a later meeting as to whether this is a decision point for the NC and the CRO, or whether it is required, because I imagine that's going to be a lengthy debate, but I'd like to get on to the rest of this.
Got it. Let me just complete this comment here.
Yep.
Okay. Moving on. This was, okay. So there are a couple spots where I think when I just move things over into this format, and again, this is not going to be a training bulletin. It's going to be a general order. When I copy things over, I just didn't put the footnotes. So there's a footnote here. It's going to be put back. It essentially said that these additional agencies or departments are listed in alphabetical order and aren't just like an exhaustive list, something to that effect. But whatever footnote was listed in reference to this list will be put back in. This change was made. It went from checking email and voice messages daily to regular workday, so it's just clear that CROs aren't responsible on their days off to have to check their voicemails and emails. Okay, this one here.
Sorry.
The verbiage. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
Finish your thought. Sorry.
The verbiage here stayed the same, except I added this clause: coordinate with the department media team. So this is when to push out like events and projects for public dissemination. So I just felt that it's best if we're going to be pushing anything out to the public, that it be done in conjunction with our department media team.
Do you mind scroll? Thank you for that. Do you mind scrolling up actually to section I think? It might be slightly different now. Okay. Well, let's see. I'm just looking at my change document, and I think that there was a change to the research and identify the 3 locations generating the highest calls for service. That's L now.
Yep, right here.
And that was
So
that was a change that originally said to research and identify and as appropriate open projects aimed at reducing these calls for service.
yes. So
And that's now changed to reporting these out to the community.
yes. Okay. So let me read my comment here. So changed it from opening a project to presenting it to allow the NCPC to determine if it should be a priority. So let's say that like the calls for service, the fact that something is a top call for service, it may not necessarily make it a priority. So instead of that being the trigger for CRO to open the project, it would be report it out to the meeting so that the neighborhood council can determine if it should be a project or not.
Thoughts on this change? I appreciate that it places some autonomy and some autonomy on the NC to make the decision. I also understand that it would still mean that CROs are researching and identifying those locations. It doesn't remove that requirement. It's the question of, will this be the priority or not? Or will this be the project or not? And putting it in the hands of the NC.
So I think it's a good, again, I propose the change. So obviously I think it's a good change, but one, again, it doesn't alleviate the CRO's responsibility of knowing what the top calls for service are, but it doesn't automatically trigger it to be a project. Instead, it's a let me present this and then let me see what the neighborhood council thinks and if it should be a project.
I'm not sensing or hearing any objections at this time. I think we'll be coming back anyhow, but I think that's something that we can move on to. I did flag. I also noted that there was a section removed. Let's see, it was the identifying properties associated with neighborhood problems, calls for service, crime, blight, and nuisance, and instituting projects to address these problems.
Yep, I have it here. So, okay. So I deleted that bullet point, which says create, gather, etc. To the neighborhood service coordinators for public dissemination, include but not limited. So we just feel it's stuff like that's best left to the media team. So for the PIO or for our media group to push out stuff to social media platforms.
I'm sorry, I don't think that was the section. I think it was one that talked about instituting projects.
Let me see.
It might be a little bit higher up. It was originally section J.
Okay, hold on.
So with the renumbering, it was probably around L, M, and N.
Okay.
And so there might be a comment to the right, or there was a deletion of it. I am kind of sort of, I feel like I'm hearing a trend in some of the edits. And I imagine that this particular one, which again, I'll say it again for the group, identifying properties associated with neighborhood problems, calls for service, crime, blight, and nuisance, and instituting projects to address these problems, might be that rather than a shall starting projects for these things, perhaps giving a little bit more autonomy for the CRO and the NC.
Yes.
Um, And I would think that perhaps,
I had it highlighted. I'm gonna put it in, sorry, just so people can see.
Yeah.
I had it highlighted in your doc and I'm gonna throw it in right now. So this is what was removed.
thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I suppose
So-
some of that might be, I guess, in line with what we have now as L.
Yes.
Since we're no longer, since we're consistent with making it a partnership and having the CRO and the NC discussed if a project should be opened for these particular things, or whether it will be a priority. Do we want to think about whether or not a CRO should report that to the NC?
Yeah, I think that in addition to the three locations generating the highest calls, we can still have the CRO know the properties that are associated with this stuff, and then have that all reported so that then it could be determined if it's going to be a project, etc. So in addition to this stuff being in what's now L, include this stuff as well. So making all of this reportable stuff collaboration with the NC.
I'm going to be the privacy devil's advocate right now, which is how do we feel about CROs reporting about, say, a house?
That is, I'm not sure. Manga, do you know if there are issues of like police saying, hey, 123 Happy Street is getting a lot of calls for service about XYZ 123? Is that an issue that you'll
I'm kind of going by the standard that we set for the release of public information, and it's usually by blocks. So we don't give a specific address on a public, just when we release information to the public, because I'm not sure there's a specific privacy commission issue for that, but I know that's our SOP just to avoid any kind of views that might be targeting specific people or locations versus problems.
Mariano?
Yeah, I think that respecting, confidentiality and privacy, it is necessary to have that kind of communication, because that's what we all look for in our neighborhood. When is that kind of information, and if it's not, related, or we see it, through a PIO or something, it's not establishing that relationship that we're seeking, in this community policing effort. So, but I understand, we have to respect any, privacy issues. But if I see a police officer, going down the street, the first thing I ask is, everything okay? Do I need to be informed? And if I'm told something, very, general or dismissive, and then I seek, my NC, any information from the NC, and I don't get it, then that's not establishing what I'm looking for.
And then just for us, sorry, Sergeant Mega here. For us, when it's brought up during meetings, that's when we can address it directly as to like, hey, we have an issue with this specific house. How can you help us? And so then that's when we talk about what resources we can provide, what we do to try to address the issue. But we don't just say like, hey, there was a domestic violence at 123 Happy Street issue, and it's been going on for like 2 weeks now. Like, we're not going to put that information out there or during the community meeting.
That's fair. I'm glad we talked about this. Let's figure out a way to sort of incorporate that in a way that respects both the communities need to know, as well as the confidentiality of the parties involved. I imagine that the further draft of this is going to not have the part about instituting projects, which we will discuss, and I think there isn't too much opposition to. those are the changes that I've seen in section 3. I think that covers that. How's everyone doing?
Good here.
Give it another 10 minutes and let's wrap up.
Yeah.
Get to section 4.
I didn't get coffee, but I'm still awake.
Me too.
I know it's not because of my speaking, so credit to you for staying awake despite. Okay, footnote to be inserted here. This we went over this, talked about the media team.
Section 4, use and auditing.
Use and auditing. Okay.
We added the first sentence of the first paragraph.
Okay. So here, so CROs shall update the SARANET database on the status of their projects or the project responses regularly, at least every 2 weeks. I added when possible, and that's to account for like absences, or they're in CPT, or we're on special assignment for a protest or something like that. So it's just covers the fact that they may not be able to do it. I don't know if this is the best word choice, but there should be some clause that, allows for a gap if required due to some absence.
I don't think you're going to hear too much objection. Just make sure when possible is the right word choice. Whatever the other policies may say, whatever words need to be the right words. The next change that I think is on the list is adding the 4th paragraph in section 4.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's your sort of future proofing this policy.
Yes. So this clause was added here, just in case SARANET is updated, it's no longer used, and that the conditions of this section shall apply to like any new database program that we end up using.
I don't think that's too controversial, but I think we can go to section 5.
Mm-hmm. This component here was will adequately staff. It says the department will adequately staff or fund the CRO program. Change to shall make reasonable efforts to adequately staff. And again, that's done purely to because we can't lock staffing. It goes beyond kind of my understanding of it, but I think this just the verbiage here just makes it the fact that stated it's a priority to staff it, but it can't always be done. Proof being our current staffing now. So that was the change that was there. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay.
Reggie, sorry, I missed out on that. You were talking about the reasonable efforts section.
Yes. So here the verbiage was changed from.
Yes, I know what it was.
Got it.
Reggie, this is where you usually jump in, I thought.
Okay. The next couple changes are in the next 2 paragraphs. I think it may have been that approvals through the area commander, but the CROs fall under special resources. So it was just changed from area commander to special resources commander.
Yep. Lieutenant Rubio, for the shall make reasonable efforts to adequately staff, would you do me a favor and just flag that to make sure we hit next meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. It's going to be one of those sections for those greater debates that we need to make choices on.
Agreed. That is it for section 5. Let me see how much we have left.
Not you.
It's not too much.
Not too much. Yeah.
Okay. So under section 6, It originally said CROs are required to use SARANET to document community-based projects. In addition to using the SARANET, CRO shall track other activities undertaken, such as crowd management, calls for service, neighborhood council priorities solved without law enforcement intervention. So condensed to, CROs are required to use SARANET or the current accepted project management website or software to document community-based projects. So the edit removes quite a bit, as you can see. Can you guys see my comment on the screen?
You can.
Okay.
Right side there.
So this was removed, and the reason why is because the other resolutions that are done without law enforcement can be tracked through the neighborhood council, or should, if they're not already. And this just kind of focuses the CRO to doing just CRO specific stuff. And so I think other things can be tracked via the NC, who can then report back to the CRO on those things that the CRO is not really involved in. I don't know if we really have mechanisms for tracking these for the CROs do. I know the department has a like a crowd control / operations database in which that stuff is tracked already. So there's some redundancy. It's just a matter of making that information available to whoever needs it, but it shouldn't fall under the responsibility of the CRO to track that stuff, particularly since the incident commanders for any of these operations, they're already uploading the data and after actions to a consolidated cloud file.
So when I look at this section, this is a little bit of history for you. I apologize for this. The document that we were working off of as part of the original ad hoc was a document that was created by the former lieutenant, DC. What was his name? He retired.
The DC of
who used to be the liaison for SSOC and CPAP.
Figueroa?
Not that one.
I don't remember.
Anyways, so I think this section obviously did not come from the community. Maybe not obviously, but was not. We didn't have these thoughts necessarily to talk about these things. But when I look at it, one of the things that I think about is sort of the thoughts about, well, CROs are asked to do a lot right now, right? And not just the community-based projects, not just the neighborhood councils, but also, I can't remember who described it to me, but basically be the Swiss Army knives of the department. Do just about anything and everything, even if it goes to answering calls for service, that are separate from the priorities. And one of the things that seems to be really important to me is knowing what our CROs are doing and how much of that time is devoted to filling holes that the department may have outside of these neighborhood council priorities or neighborhood council work or community-based projects. But we don't really have a good sense of how we might document that besides, well, them telling us or the reports from neighborhood councils about anecdotal information about what they think their CRO is doing. This is, for me, I think a little bit more of a, how do we make sure that the CROs are doing what we want them to do rather than what the community wants them to do, as opposed to what the department may need them to do, which I understand is a reality. And so when it gets brought down to the community-based projects, we lose out on that. And I understand, like, that's not what your system does right now, right? And it's probably pretty unfair for the CROs to, actually very, very unfair for the CROs to actually track that because they're probably busy enough as it is, just doing the work that they're being asked to do. But I would make the pitch from an accountability perspective of making sure that we find some way to track that. And I hope that the department might be able to give us some information about how that is and how we might be able to do that without increasing the load on the CROs. Is that something that we can look into?
Yep, absolutely.
Commissioner Shea, how is this different from the concern about having open projects and tasks that we discussed earlier?
I think it's different in that this is sometimes it's a different facet of the same problem. It's a different facet of the same problem, right? It's a on the one hand, the separate projects thing, or one project per beat, is mandating them to do it. And we're hearing pushback about the reality of the situation. From this part, it's are you actually doing it? And the other part is, like Lieutenant Toribio mentioned, there was a PSO who just took every issue and made it into a project, but maybe wasn't. I won't make value judgments about whether or not the completion of many different projects as opposed to one big project is better or worse, but it's different, right? And without the sort of tracking perspective and the data, well, we're left with stories that I think are subject to debate and sort of, is that true or not, as opposed to just getting some real numbers.
Okay, so this is addressing accountability, measurable accomplishments, and okay.
And the implementation of Measure Y, Measure Z, whatever the exact thing funds are for the SSOC to take on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was just thinking, the same answer could be, it's a different question, but the same answer could be given by OPD. But I see where it might be different. Thanks.
Yeah, at least from OPD's perspective, I totally understand what this is looking to do. It's man, my CRO wasn't available. What kind of tangible thing can I see that just shows where my CRO is putting his or her efforts? And so we're just looking to have something, and I don't know if it's possible through SARANET. But I made a comment on that to research and look up something that can account for quantifying the CRO's work that's being done beyond like the projects and whatnot.
Right. Because frankly, like, we may want them to be doing that. We may not, I don't know, but we don't know because we don't know what it is. Sorry for that soapbox.
No. It's making this policy better.
The next set of changes are section 7, but
again,
I think I won't rush us through it. We got 8 minutes, so we're coming back.
No problem. Looks like there were footnotes that will be put back in. Again, I think this is a list that's alphabetical and not per like priority. There was some stuff formatting, some stuff where I need to have an appendix reference.
And then there's an evaluation portion and then a tenure portion that may draw some comments. So
yes. Okay. So here under tenure, this is section 8. The verbiage was shall, and I think Chief Beard talked about this last meeting. There are various reasons why people move assignments, and while we ideally want a CRO to be in place for a minimum of 3 years, just because turnover creates instability, and then everybody has to start at a fresh base when somebody new comes in. I think from my understanding, it's very difficult to just ensure that a CRO isn't going to be moved for 3 years. The fact that, I mean, the tenure section, it shows that it's important and that it's the ideal, but there could be a number of reasons. And again, it can be anything from a department need to maybe even a personal need, right? Like a CRO has some family issue and now has to change to an assignment with different hours because of a major life change or something like that. So the verbiage was changed from shall to should.
I recall this being mentioned to me as an MOU.
Okay, that may be it as well, because of the quote unquote freedom for flexibility of moving people. That could very well be it then. Okay, next under evaluation. This section talks about performance reviews and appraisals, and the line originally said that evaluating supervisors shall collect, review, and incorporate community and neighborhood council input in their evaluations of CROs. All community input regarding CROs shall be included in the evaluation. It was may, and I can't remember the reasoning behind that, but I can see just it being problematic. I don't know if it's a
I would suggest that we find out the reason before you opine on it, because this is going to be let's figure out what the reason is.
yeah, that's not fair for you guys to just have to evaluate something without me being able to speak to it. So that's very fair.
Partly because also that was also a very important point that we have about collecting. Brenda, excuse me.
Okay.
Brenda, you're still.
I'm sorry, got it. If it must be changed, can we use something a little stronger than may and maybe say the evaluating supervisor should collect, review, and incorporate community, something like that?
Yeah,
Make
let me again find the reason why.
Right.
And then that may change kind of the focus of the discussion on this section. Yeah.
Yeah, if it can't be shall for whatever reason, maybe we should say should.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or are strongly encouraged to, or something like that.
It was it was very much a push that, although understandably, that there's a lot that goes into police work that may be beyond the knowledge of all community members. The community input and sort of their relationship with their CRO is a big part of this whole thing, and that trust and that relationship building is key to, I think, the city's plan for community policing. I see a second hand, but I can't find it. Oh, community attendee. Oh, okay. Well, actually, I think the last thing was italics and footnotes. I do see a community member that does have their hand up. Ms. Oligbala, I'm going to give her 2 minutes and then let's talk about what we do next. Ms. Oligbala, I think I've given you permission to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, let me pull over. I'm driving. I shouldn't be on.
Oh dear, I'm sorry.
I just got out. No, I was in another meeting, the Privacy Commission, and I've been in and out with your meeting. But just 2 points I wanted to bring up. One is, under the definition of community policing, many cities and communities have various definitions of what that is. I support the concept of community policing involves every police officer having the capacity to have a relationship with the neighborhood or community that they are assigned to. And in having that relationship, certain aspects of cooperating and working within his beat takes place. Here in Oakland, we have community policing designated to 30-something officers. Along with that, it's mostly a relationship with the NCPCs, where the majority of the people who live in Oakland get to have a relationship with those community resource officers. I have tried over the years to be a participant with NCPCs. Y25 is my beat, and it's been a struggle for many various reasons to really have a good, healthy NCPC in Y25. So, and the last point, and that connected to that point is, NCPCs are working in some areas, and in some areas it doesn't exist, or it exists in a very limited capacity. So we don't have a holistic approach to community policing working geographically for everybody. The last point is, we have to have community policing that involves culturally competent officers working in those communities, because we have a very diverse city, and the officer who works in a certain community has to be culturally competent. And that involves language, race, traditions, and understanding whatever. So I just wanted to say that I don't know if the policy calls for cultural competency. I don't know if the policy calls for a broadening eventually of community policing to be more than CROs, but I hope at some point it gets there. And I just don't see community policing impacting a large percentage of the city of Oakland the way it's working right now. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Ms. Holland-Pollock. July 20th, 2 Thursdays from now, 6 p.m. How is that for everyone?
I will not be available that evening, unfortunately.
Okay.
The 20th through the 23rd, I'll be out of town. So that Thursday through Sunday, I'll be out of town.
Is it the 20th through the 23rd?
Yes, sir.
So 24 or 25?
Okay. Do August 3rd. Will probably coincide with another privacy commission meeting, but feels like we're moving.
On what day? We're looking at July, right?
Sorry, August 3rd.
Oh,
Trying to keep them
August.
on Thursdays.
Oh, on Thursdays.
Yeah, the off commission Thursdays.
Okay.
I won't be here. I'll be in Denver attending my youngest daughter's wedding.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. I think I might pencil in August 3rd, but still send in a try to see if there might be an alternative date that's a little bit closer. So why don't we do that? Apologies, Mariano. Let's shoot for August 3rd, but I will send some emails and we'll try to see if there's something that we can work out a good time for. Earlier, I'd like to keep the momentum going, but I also understand that sometimes life gets in the way.
Yeah, and I will send you my wording that's done, but I don't think we have time to discuss it.
So thank you so much. Why don't you send it to Lieutenant Toribio, or all of us, then Lieutenant Toribio will incorporate. And
okay,
Lieutenant Toribio, if you end up getting those revisions on some of the things or proposals, if you could try to send them a couple of days early.
Will do.
Much appreciated. All right. Pencil in August 3rd at 6 p.m. and then I will send some follow-up emails to see if we can find another time before. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right,
Thank you. Have a good night.
Time and the work is much appreciated. I'm sorry. Sorry for the time, but it's
Thank you.
what it is.
Right. Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.